What happens when a beloved comedian decides he's had enough of daytime television's fake smiles and scripted pleasantries? You won't believe what unfolds when Ricky Gervais sits down with Lorraine Kelly and absolutely destroys everything she stands for on live television. This isn't your typical morning chat show moment. This is television history in the making. And it all exploded last night in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two television personalities go head to head in what can only be described as the most brutal confrontation daytime TV has ever witnessed. The atmosphere in the studio was already thick with tension before Gervais even stepped onto the set. Behind the scenes, production staff were whispering about how the comedian had been increasingly vocal about his disdain for what he called soulless morning television in recent interviews. Lorraine Kelly, ever the professional, had prepared her usual warm welcome, but those who know Gervais understood that his appearance was never going to be just another promotional chat about his latest project. As the cameras rolled and that familiar theme music played, Lorraine beamed her trademark smile toward the camera, completely unaware that she was about to face the most challenging guest of her entire career. "Now then," she began in her Scottish lilt, "we're absolutely delighted to be joined by the wonderfully talented Ricky Gervais." The comedian walked onto the set with that familiar smirk playing across his face, the one that regular viewers of his stand-up know means trouble is brewing. From the very moment Gervais settled into that bright orange chair, something felt different. While Lorraine launched into her prepared introduction about his upcoming tour dates and Netflix specials, Gervais sat silently, his eyes scanning the studio with obvious disdain. The fake plants, the overly cheerful set design, the production assistants frantically signaling from behind the cameras, everything seemed to be feeding into his growing irritation. "So, Ricky," Lorraine continued, her voice dripping with that practiced morning television enthusiasm, "tell us about this exciting new project you're working on. I'm sure our viewers are just dying to hear all about it." She leaned forward slightly, maintaining that professional smile that had served her so well over decades of broadcasting. Gervais tilted his head, studying her for a moment before responding. "You know what, Lorraine? I've got to ask, do you actually care about any of this shit? Or is it all just part of the act?" The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to laugh or gasp. Lorraine's smile flickered for just a moment before snapping back into place. "Oh, well, of course I care, Ricky. That's what we do here. We celebrate people's achievements and share their stories with our wonderful audience." Her voice carried just a hint of defensiveness, though she tried to mask it with her usual warmth. Right. Gervais nodded sarcastically. "Because nothing says genuine interest like reading questions off a card that some 20-something intern wrote for you 5 minutes before we went live." He gestured toward the prompt cards that Lorraine had placed discreetly beside her chair. "Tell me, when was the last time you had an actual conversation with someone on this show? Not an interview, not a promotional segment, an actual human conversation." The camera operators were having a field day, switching between wide shots of the increasingly uncomfortable studio audience and tight close-ups of Lorraine's face as her composure began to crack. This wasn't going according to script, and everyone in the building could feel it. "I have genuine conversations with all my guests," Lorraine insisted, her Scottish accent becoming more pronounced as her stress levels rose. "That's what people love about the show. It's real, it's authentic, it's from the heart." She placed her hand over her chest for emphasis, a gesture that looked painfully rehearsed under Gervais's withering stare. "Authentic?" Gervais let out a sharp laugh that echoed through the studio. "Lorraine, with all due respect, there's nothing authentic about any of this. You've got more makeup on than a funeral director's window display. We're sitting on furniture that costs more than most people's cars. And you're asking me questions about projects that your research team probably got wrong anyway." He leaned back in his chair, clearly warming to his theme. The production team behind the cameras was in full panic mode. The show's director was frantically making hand signals, trying to get Lorraine to steer the conversation back to safer territory. But Gervais was just getting started. He had obviously come here with something to prove, and Lorraine Kelly's morning show was about to become his battlefield. I think you're being a bit unfair there, Ricky, Lorraine said, her voice carrying a sharp edge that regular viewers had rarely heard before. We work very hard to create a show that brings joy and positivity into people's lives. Not everything has to be cynical and negative. The gloves were starting to come off, and the tension in the studio was becoming palpable. Gervais straightened up in his chair, his expression shifting from amused to genuinely annoyed. Joy and positivity? Is that what you call this manufactured bullshit? You parade celebrities in here like performing monkeys, ask them the same vapid questions that every other morning show asks, and then act like you're providing some kind of public service. His voice was rising now, and several audience members were visibly squirming. We provide entertainment, Lorraine shot back, her professional facade finally beginning to crack. We give people a break from their everyday problems. What's wrong with that? There was genuine anger creeping into her voice now, and the careful script that had governed their interaction was completely out the window. You know what really pisses me off about this whole charade? Gervais continued, his voice dropping to a more dangerous tone. It's that you sit there pretending to care about mental health awareness and supporting people through difficult times. But the moment someone shows up here who doesn't fit your sanitized little bubble, you can't handle it. He gestured broadly at the studio around them. This isn't real life, Lorraine. This is a fucking fantasy land where everything's always fine and everyone's always bloody delighted about everything. The color drained from Lorraine's face as she realized this wasn't going to be something she could laugh off or redirect with her usual charm offensive. The studio audience was completely silent now, watching this car crash unfold in real time. Even the camera crew seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep filming or cut to commercial. I think you need to calm down, Lorraine said firmly, trying to regain control of her own show. We're live on television, and there are families watching with their children. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had been doing this job for decades, but Gervais wasn't intimidated in the slightest. Oh, now you're concerned about the children. Gervais laughed bitterly. Where was that concern when you had that fitness guru on last month telling overweight teenagers they just needed to believe in themselves to lose weight? Or when you platformed that self-help charlatan who was selling miracle cures to desperate people? His eyes were blazing now, and it was clear he had come prepared with specific grievances. Lorraine's composure was cracking more visibly now. We vet all our guests carefully, and we always act in good faith, she protested. But her voice lacked the conviction it had carried just minutes earlier. The carefully constructed world of morning television was being systematically demolished right in front of millions of viewers. Good faith? Gervais was incredulous. You had a convicted fraudster on here 3 weeks ago, talking about his journey of redemption, because his publicist paid your producers enough money. Don't fucking lecture me about good faith when this entire show is built on bad faith from the ground up. The swearing was becoming more frequent now, and the production team was clearly struggling with whether to cut the feed entirely. The confrontation was spiraling completely out of control, and Lorraine was beginning to realize that her usual tactics weren't going to work. I don't have to sit here and listen to this, she said, her Scottish accent thickening with anger. You came on my show, in my studio, and you're being deliberately hostile and disruptive. Your show? Gervais stood up from his chair, towering over the coffee table between them. This isn't your show, Lorraine. This is ITV's show. You're just the face they've chosen to front it, because you test well with housewives and pensioners. You're as replaceable as yesterday's newspaper, and deep down, you fucking know it. The words hit Lorraine like a physical blow. For a moment, her professional mask slipped entirely, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. How dare you? She whispered, her voice shaking with genuine emotion. I've worked my entire career to build something meaningful here. Meaningful? Gervais was relentless now. You want to know what's meaningful? Meaningful is telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Meaningful is having actual conversations about real problems instead of this endless parade of celebrity puff pieces and lifestyle segments designed to make people feel inadequate about their own lives. The studio had become a pressure cooker, with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Lorraine was fighting back tears now, but she wasn't backing down. You think you're so much better than everyone else, she shot back, finding her voice again. You think because you tell a few jokes and point out how awful everything is, That makes you some kind of truth teller. But all you are is a bitter, cynical man who tears other people down to make himself feel important. That accusation seemed to hit Gervais harder than he'd expected. His expression darkened, and for a moment, the studio fell completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras and the nervous shuffling of the audience. When he spoke again, his voice was ice cold. "At least I'm honest about what I am," he said quietly. "I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I don't smile and wave and act like everything's wonderful when it's clearly not. And I sure as hell don't make a living out of selling false hope to people who are struggling just to get through their day." Lorraine stood up as well now, matching his aggressive posture. "False hope? Is that what you call it, when we try to show people that there are good things in the world? When we celebrate achievements and share stories that might inspire someone who's going through a difficult time? I call it exploitation," Gervais fired back. "You take people's genuine struggles and turn them into entertainment. You parade cancer survivors and bereaved parents in front of the cameras so your viewers can have a good cry and feel better about themselves. It's emotional pornography, and you're the fucking pimp." The comparison was so brutal and unexpected that it sucked all the air out of the room. Several audience members audibly gasped, and Lorraine looked as though she'd been slapped. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of this unprecedented breakdown in daytime television decorum. Lorraine's face had gone from pale to flushed red with rage. The accusation of being a pimp had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now she was operating on pure fury. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Get out of my studio right now." But Gervais wasn't finished destroying everything in his path. "Oh, now you want me to leave? What happened to all that fake hospitality? What happened to, 'We're absolutely delighted to have you here'?" He mimicked her earlier greeting with vicious accuracy, his voice dripping with contempt. The production crew was in complete chaos behind the cameras. The director was frantically trying to decide whether to cut to commercial, but this train wreck was so compelling that cutting away might actually hurt their ratings. This was television gold, even if it was career suicide for everyone involved. "You're a pathetic excuse for a human being," Lorraine spat, abandoning any pretense of professionalism. "You come into my workplace, insult me, insult my staff, insult everything we've worked to build here, and you think that makes you clever?" Gervais laughed, but there was no humor in it anymore. "Your workplace? This isn't a workplace, Lorraine. This is a theme park for middle-aged women who've given up on their dreams. You're not a journalist. You're not an interviewer. You're a glorified shopping channel presenter who occasionally talks to celebrities between segments about miracle face creams." The audience was completely stunned into silence. Some were recording on their phones, others were looking around nervously, as if expecting security to intervene at any moment. This had gone so far beyond normal television that nobody knew how to react anymore. "At least I don't make a living out of being cruel," Lorraine shot back, her voice cracking with emotion. "At least I try to bring some positivity into the world, instead of just tearing everything down like some bitter, twisted troll who can't stand to see other people happy." That seemed to be the final straw for Gervais. His expression shifted from angry to genuinely dangerous, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet but filled with venom. "You want to know what's really twisted, Lorraine? What's twisted is pretending that everything's fine when it's not. What's twisted is selling people false hope and calling it kindness. What's twisted is building a career on other people's misery and calling yourself a fucking saint." He stepped closer to her desk, and for a moment, it looked like the confrontation might become physical. The studio security team was clearly on high alert, ready to intervene if necessary. "You sit here every morning in your designer outfits, interviewing people about their tragedies and their triumphs, and you think you're helping them. But you're not helping anyone, Lorraine. You're exploiting them for ratings. And then you go home to your mansion and count your money while they go back to their real lives with their real problems that your show has done fuck all to solve." Lorraine was shaking now, but whether from rage or hurt was impossible to tell. "I've helped thousands of people over the years," she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've raised millions for charity. I've given people platforms to tell their stories. I've made a difference." "You've made a profit," Gervais corrected brutally. "Every charity segment, every inspirational story, every tear-jerking interview, it's all just content to you. It's all just something to fill the space between advertisements. You don't give a shit about these people once the cameras stop rolling. The confrontation had reached its absolute peak, with both participants pushed beyond their breaking points. But what happened next would become the moment that everyone would remember. The final explosive seconds that would be replayed on social media for years to come. "You know what?" Gervais said, suddenly stepping back from Lorraine's desk. "I'm done with this. I'm done with you. I'm done with this pathetic excuse for a television show. And I'm done pretending that any of this matters." He unclipped his microphone and threw it onto the coffee table with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent studio. "You can keep your fake smiles and your scripted conversations and your manufactured drama, but don't ever pretend that what you do here has any value beyond making money for the people who own this network." He turned toward the audience, addressing them directly. "And all of you sitting there watching this, you deserve better than this shit. You deserve real conversations about real issues, not this sanitized, corporate-approved bullshit that's designed to keep you passive and compliant." Lorraine was standing behind her desk now, tears streaming down her face, but still trying to maintain some semblance of control. "Security!" she called out, her voice breaking. "Get him out of here!" But Gervais was already walking toward the exit, his long strides carrying him quickly across the studio floor. As he reached the edge of the set, he turned back one final time. "This is exactly the problem with television today," he announced to the cameras. "The moment someone tells the truth, the moment someone refuses to play along with the charade, you call security. Well, congratulations, Lorraine. You've just proved every single point I was trying to make." The studio doors slammed shut behind him with a resounding bang that seemed to echo through the entire building. For a moment, nobody moved. The cameras kept rolling, capturing Lorraine standing alone behind her desk, mascara running down her cheeks, surrounded by the wreckage of what had been a routine morning television interview just 20 minutes earlier. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether to applaud or flee. The production crew stood frozen at their stations, waiting for someone to tell them what to do next. And Lorraine Kelly, the queen of morning television, stood in the ruins of her carefully constructed world, finally forced to confront the reality that Ricky Gervais had so brutally exposed. The show cut to commercial break, but the damage was already done. In those explosive 20 minutes, everything had changed, and British daytime television would never be the same again.